Welcome to On the Beat, where we bring you a different Buffalo Bills beat reporter every week, exclusively on the Overreaction Sports Network.
Well, what is going on, everybody? Welcome everybody into On the Beat, brought to you exclusively, as Bruce Nolan just said, on the Overreaction Sports Network, a show where we bring you an exclusive interview with a different Bills beat reporter or journalist every single week, and we talk about the topics swirling around our beloved Buffalo Bills. I am Joe Miller. You can find me on Twitter at Joe Miller Wired, alongside my co-host today, Jerry Ostrowski, former Buffalo Bill. I like to call him the Swiss Army knife, if you will, of the offensive line for the Buffalo Bills. But please do us a favor. Please like, please subscribe. Whatever platform you are consuming this podcast or vidcast on, please subscribe and get our numbers up for us. We would greatly appreciate it. But we are super, super excited for this show. Joining us, sports anchor from 13WHAM out of Rochester, as well as the Buffalo Plus podcast with Mike Catalana and Dan Fates. Dan Fates, the same Dan Fates we just had on about 3 or 4 weeks ago. My awesome pleasure to introduce to the show, Jenna Cottrell. Jenna, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on, guys.
Super good to have you. Jerry, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Just dodged a hailstorm down here in Tulsa. It's always weather is always a big event down here. So we just had a huge thunderstorm, hail, but we got unscathed. So we're appreciative for that.
That's like Tulsa's version of snow, right? Like hail.
Yeah, we get some snow, but what we get is ice, man. Like we'll get like 2-3 week long debilitating ice storms where like things are shut down. And believe me, you would much rather have 3 foot of snow in 45 minutes than ice any day. Ice is awful.
Yeah, Jenna and I have no idea what you're talking about because the weather here is beautiful.
It's so nice. Sorry.
I had to turn on my air conditioning today. I'm like, it's May and my air conditioning is on. This is absolutely incredible. So, but just want to say welcome to everybody who is joining us in the chat. Again, like Jerry always likes to say, if you are on Facebook or X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it right now, please jump over to YouTube. The community there from a chat standpoint is just a lot more fun. But welcome to Daniel. Welcome to Sharon. Maggie, who else? Tracy's in the room. Just all of you that are joining us right now. Thank you so much for being with us. But we're going to go ahead and just get started because the Buffalo Bills have gotten started. But before we talk about OTAs and the pressers and kind of the stuff at hand, one thing that's kind of gotten brushed over, and we were talking about a pre-show, is the Buffalo Bills recently announced that they're going back to St. John Fisher, which is right in your neck of the woods, Jenna, which to me was a little strange because I just assumed that's what was happening. But they felt the need to come out and be like, oh yeah, by the way, we're going to St. John Fisher again. Thoughts on that whole thing? And why wasn't it why isn't it a contract thing?
Yeah. So it is a contract. They do a 1-year contract though. So in the past they've done like 4 years and stuff like that. Right. But more recently they've been doing the 1-year contracts. And I'll be completely honest with you. I love camp in Fisher because it's a 15-minute drive compared to an hour and 15 minutes. But not even that. I just think the experience for the fans, especially the fans in the Rochester area, it's just so much closer. There's so much more interaction. You get to see so many kids there that are kind of right there on the field or very close by. So I think for the Bills, they like having the flexibility of, hey, if things change and they want to make camp at a different location, they have that ability. We know it's pretty rare in the NFL that teams have their training camp away like the Bills do. Right. Not many teams do that anymore. But I think especially heading into this year, there's so many new faces. Like Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane have talked so much about how much they love that idea of going away to camp because not like they're building bonfires and stuff and singing Kumbaya, but you're away from your family. You're out there. You kind of have the opportunity to do some of that team building that if you were to go home later that night, you're not having that same chance. So I think for the Bills, it makes total sense. You can also go to Pittsford Dairy, which is phenomenal ice cream right around the corner. Again, I'm biased. But I think it works out well for the Bills. Another year at Fisher. I know so many fans love it.
Think about this guy that had to stay in the dorms in Fredonia, New York. Okay. I mean, you want to talk about stealing yourself and coming together as a team. Nothing does that like Fredonia, New York. But no, hey, we went to Rochester my last so many years. There was like 2 or 3 years, and it was outstanding. And I think I asked you before the show, there's this restaurant there called Mama San's that we used to go to, this Asian restaurant. And we one day we're sitting around, and when we went to Rochester was the inception of the motorhome sponsorship. So we had some players that were getting motorhomes. They were doing ads for places and getting like these huge motorhomes. So we're there one night. We all want to go to dinner, and we're like, let's go to Mama San's. Well, Drew Bledsoe just got picked up. So Bledsoe, we had like probably 12 guys that wanted to go. So instead of taking like 3 or 4 cars, Bledsoe just pulled the slides in, and we fired the motorhome up and drove down to Mama San's in Rochester, parked it in a lot like a block away, piled out, went and had a quick little dinner. It was a good time, then drove back. So that was my memory of Rochester with one Drew Bledsoe.
Love it. Honestly, like that is the kind of stuff though that like you can't buy that. Like especially for a team like I talked about with the Bills this year in particular, like so many new guys.
Right.
The RV, I love that story also, just what it represents. But yeah, it's perfect for the Bills this year.
What is the fallback plan there? Is it just doing it in Buffalo, like at the stadium?
Yeah, I think like during the 2020 season when obviously COVID changed a lot of things, when the Bills did have camp essentially in Buffalo. I think for the Bills though, they don't currently have the space to have like a lot of sponsors out there and a lot of fans. So I think what Fisher does is it gives the opportunity for the team to get away. And then it also has already set up the infrastructure for fans to be involved, for more fans to be right there. Whereas right now in Buffalo, like they have the beautiful training facility in terms of the weight room and all that stuff, but in terms of the actual fields, they have 3 of them, which are not really conducive to having a lot of fans around.
Well, I had the pleasure or not pleasure of going to 3 separate training camps, as I was cut a couple times before I made it in Buffalo. But like when I was drafted by the Chiefs, so we actually went to Kansas City, got on an airplane, flew to Minneapolis, and then bussed like 2 hours to River Falls, Wisconsin, and stayed in the university there and practiced there. We're part of the Cheese League. And then when I was in Atlanta, they had a complex in Swanee at the time. They've since have moved into Gainesville, but they had a complex in Swanee that had a motel right there. They called it the Falcon Inn, and they had all their facilities and practice fields in this motel. So when training camp was going on, the motel was occupied, or hotel was occupied. And then when training camp was over, they rented it out to people that needed a place to stay for the night. So yeah, there's many ways to do it.
Yeah.
Well, St. John Fisher, I can tell you, Jerry, has changed a lot since you were there. Like the amount of fields, and the Bills have done a lot of that, right? So I mean, accommodating Buffalo and this team, and the money that the Buffalo Bills have paid, and as you said, Russ Brandon had a lot to do with that as well. But as we were talking about, or as we're going to talk about, actual football things are actually kind of happening. We've got players like with helmets and not pads on, but sure, jerseys on with numbers and names. Interviews, videos of practice. Josh Allen looks amazing in shorts, as we all know. And the weather, as we already talked about, is fantastic. And Jenny, you've got to be loving it just like we are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, like we were actually walking today because first day of OTAs that we could be there. So, I'm rounding the corner. I have Dan Fates next to me and Matt Beauvais of Channel 7. And I'm like, guys, like, it's here, like, because don't get me wrong, the season can be a grind, and I can't imagine for the players, because sometimes for us, I'm like, oh my gosh, I am gassed.
Yeah.
But that time away, I mean, it's football. You love it. You just the idea of just going back out there, seeing what this team will bring this season, and obviously it's incredibly early. But I just think the excitement of that, and this year is different because I've been covering this team for 7-8 years now, and you see the same guys over and over again. And, like defensively, Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, of course, for the last couple of years, it's been Mitch Morris, there's Gabe Davis, there's Stephon Diggs, like, these guys. And I walked into, we talk about OTAs, the first day being like the first day of school. And it's like, this is the first day of school at a new school.
That's
because I'm like looking at the roster cards because I actually need them. Whereas normally I'm like, oh, I know who everyone is. But, seeing Chase Claypool in number 14, Mac Hollins in number 13, it was just like a very different experience than what a lot of people have been used to over these last couple of years.
Yep.
And I have to ask Jenna, and I think Joe's going to get into a little bit of this here in a minute, but being there, being through the OTA, seeing this, is there seems to be a levity to this group right now. They seem to be a lot more loose. McDermott doesn't seem to be on edge. For a team that's going through a retool process, a minor rebuild, there seems to be not a lot of stress. Can you put your finger on that?
So we call it off-season Sean McDermott.
Oh,
okay. Not the way I thought we were going to go.
Because I think for him right now, it is, especially with so many new guys, and it being the offseason, they can be a little bit lighter. They can show their personalities a little bit more. They're not preparing for a game on Sunday. They're not coming off a loss and have to prepare for a really tough, it's just a different vibe. And so that being said, it's not that I expect that this team is going to be like, oh, we're great, good going in. But I just think right now where we're at in the actual calendar kind of dictates a little bit more of the vibe that you get. That being said, though, there's absolutely a different dynamic because this is also a roster right now with how many people, which again, we'll get it narrowed down as we get closer to the season, but there's a ton of competition on this roster as well. And so with that all baked in, I think that where this team is at, they're trying to gel, they're trying to build chemistry, they're also competing. So it's just kind of a different vibe than we talked so much in the years past about like the Bills had continuity, but was there too much continuity? Was that hurting this team? Whereas this year, I think it's just competition. It's seeing where this team is at. And also it's Josh Allen and him continuing his evolution as a leader. And now, there's Khalil Shakir that was on this roster last year, but talking about the new talent out there for him, he's trying to get a lot of guys up to speed. So the maturation process of him as a leader as well is another thing that, makes this year a little bit different in terms of where this team is at.
So first day at school at a new school, as you said, and we've talked on this program and on this network a lot about the fact that, it was just a short 5 years ago when Sean McDermott was calling all the wide receivers the Smurfs. And I'm sure you remember that because they were all so small. And now the top four or four of the top six are all 6'4". He's got Dalton Kincaid at 6'5", Dawson Knox at 6'5", Curtis Samuel 6 feet, Khalil 6 feet. They're all bigger dudes.
Yeah, they're working on their starting five. Yeah.
So without saying Keon Coleman, and you can say Keon Coleman, who stuck out just in what you saw? Who flashed like just to the eyes? Who was like, oh, all right.
Well, first of all, Chase Claypool, because he was wearing number 14.
Right. That's a big dude. 14. Yeah.
But he is a big dude. He is just that bigger bodied guy. And, we talked about last year, Gabe Davis was a bigger bodied guy, but for the most part, you mentioned the Smurfs. I feel like that was kind of the type that you expected. And then now it's you have to be over 6'3" to get on the roster. So it definitely does feel different.
I noticed his neck, by the way. I noticed his neck. Chase Claypool's neck was his head was this big, and his neck
catch today too. One of those contested balls that you're oh, I see you. I definitely see the upside.
Yeah.
I do want to keep on the Claypool topic, and McDermott had a ton of praise for him today. Talked about his willingness to do special teams, his attitude coming into this. Two things. Can you see that? And maybe is this a byproduct of just this is a different team? I mean, Josh Allen isn't kind of that, hardcore general, really grind guys in practice. He's more of a a lighthearted individual. Does this seem to fit Claypool a little better than where he's been?
I think it can be both of him seeing Josh and kind of, the pedigree that's expected of this team. And also I think where Claypool is at in his career.
Right.
And some of the mistakes that he made earlier on in his career. And if he was ready for the moment, and obviously the NFL, not for long, the NFL acronym of, it takes a lot to stick around in this league. There are a ton of amazingly talented guys.
Very
yeah.
nice.
I'm looking at one. Sorry, Joe, not you. But I think sometimes when guys are expected to be the guy, they think that the runway is undoubtedly longer, but also if you're not producing, if you're not showing up, if you're not taking this seriously, there are a ton of other guys that want that spot. So I think for Claypool, McDermott said it today, this was McDermott's words, but he felt like Claypool was on a mission to reclaim his career.
Yeah.
And I think for Claypool, it's kind of the put up or shut up time, because at a certain point, it's like, all right, dude, what are you doing? So this is an opportunity for him. And you see the intangibles. We talked about his height. We talked about his, some of the catches that he's able to make, those contested balls, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, you gotta, like, when the Bills signed him, I'm like, all right, we'll see if he makes the roster, because where is he going to be at? Where's his head going to be at? But that is something that you definitely see how he could absolutely add to this wide receiver core. And that's if he's ready. And it does feel like, from what Sean McDermott said today, he feels ready. But it's also OTAs and all that stuff. So will that not determination, but will that focus stick is yet to be seen.
We had Dan on right after, like immediately after they signed him, and it was funny to watch him on the Buffalo Plus show just biting his tongue. Like my arms were flailing.
Oh, that's just Dan. That's just Dan.
I was like, I felt like there was something you wanted to say and you just didn't want to risk letting it out. But you talked about just the energy and the looseness, and we all kind of talked about it a little bit. Did you feel, I felt this way, and I just want to ask you, did you feel that there was any, we call it subtweeting, right, on X, on Twitter. Do you feel that there was any sub comments at the pressers today, specifically from McDermott, as it pertained to just the energy of the team? Like McDermott isn't worried about nonsense.
No. So the one thing that kind of stood out to me was, and I made this analogy on the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel, but like Sean McDermott, I've been covering this team for a long time. It was at his introductory press conference. What McDermott will do is, when he's talking about it, you ask about a specific player, he will lump in the rest of those players in that position group.
Yep.
You'll ask about Josh Allen. Josh Allen, like all of our quarterbacks, is trying to continue to improve. And you're like, okay, well, I don't care about Mitch Trubisky right now. I'm not talking about Mitch. I'm talking about, you know what I mean?
Preach, Jenna.
Sorry.
Preach.
No, continue.
But McDermott was asked about Claypool. Again, we're very early, and he was glowing remarks, to the extent where I told Dan Fates, my coworker, I said, it almost talks about a guy who gets out of a bad relationship and is like, my new girlfriend's so hot, which I don't know if you can even like, what, that's how I felt. I just felt like for him, it was so positive without usually like he still needs to keep working. It was just so much more than I ever expected, especially where we're at in the season. So that kind of took me off guard, because I was like, wow, that seems like pretty heavy-handed for a guy who we know likes to keep his cards close to his chest. So that being said, I thought that was kind of funny, and I was kind of thrown off by that. But for the most part, I feel like McDermott just talked about there being a new energy with the new faces on offense. He talked a lot about Micah Hyde as well, and just where the team sits. Micah Hyde talked on Sunday at his charity softball game just about how, it would either be retiring or it would be coming back to the Bills. It wouldn't be anything else.
Yep.
And McDermott was asked about it was actually Steve Tasker that asked, hey, are you just telling Micah to stay in shape just in case? And McDermott was very respectful. And he's like, look, Micah Hyde's always on our radar. So I think that was the perfect way to phrase it too, because, you don't know what the season will be like, what injuries will be like. And I mean, Micah Hyde has had an incredible career. He's also had neck issues. So you want to be obviously cautious, respectful of where he's at. But it was a lot of kind of stuff like that.
I'll just go ahead and say it. I tried to take you down this path, but you're too good. Is the team benefiting from Stephon Diggs not being around? I mean, that's simple. I tried to get you down that path earlier.
No.
You're a professional. I couldn't do it. Are they and granted, I mean, obviously you don't benefit from losing a receiver like that, but attitude-wise, morale-wise, just overall, the way things feel, are they benefiting from not having that negative piece in the locker room?
There was a bobber on the pond, and Jenna was like, nope, not
doing
it. Here's my take on it. Stephon Diggs is an incredibly good wide receiver.
Who didn't show up to OTAs today.
I'm not shocked. Again, I'm not shocked. I think there was tension, though, between him and Allen. I think there was that weird energy after the loss against Cincinnati to end the season. We talked about it all. bleeping off season. Is it weird? Is it not weird? Whatever. We come to camp that year, last year. Diggs completely squashes that. Josh is my guy. I want to retire Bill, all this stuff. So you thought, okay. But it felt like at the end of last season, there was a disconnect. And I don't know whether Diggs was like, hey, I want to be traded. I'm done with this. Or obviously the move was made, though. And the Bills kept everything very close to the chest, which I'm not surprised by. I think this team will absolutely miss the production that Diggs is. Like, let's be real. This is a matchup-based league.
Yes.
And you look at the Bills wide receiver core and you're not like, ooh, this person scares me. You're like, oh, Chase Claypool is a good name, but he hasn't been able to produce in the way people expected in the last couple seasons. So I think on the field, you're going to miss that, like that dog, right? But I also think there's something to be said about the anxiety that Diggs's relationship caused throughout the season and how caustic that could be at points. And I mean, you guys, you've obviously been on some football teams. Joe, I'm sure you played sports. Like that can absolutely affect the morale of a team. And I think you can be on eggshells. So I think short term, I think it's better for this team. Long term, I think they might miss that production, but I think the Bills are going like beanball of like, all right, let's like Billy Bean, like we'll make up the aggregate type of thing. We'll see if that works. But I think the Bills made the move that they did, so they can say whatever they want, but they still thought this team, they were still okay with moving on from a player like him.
Yeah, I want to get to Micah Hyde in a second. Coach, however, said today that there's 8 new wide receiver faces on this team. And obviously the only returning players, just for Bills Mafia that are tuning in, Shakir Isabella, who actually played in 2023, and then Shorter and Shavers, who did not. How long do you feel, what is the expectation before these guys are potentially going to get on the same page? We watched, right? So my memory goes back to Tom Brady in the last 3, 4, 5-ish years that he was with the Patriots. And they would come out with a new wide receiver core, it seemed like every single year. And there was a 3 or 4 or 5, and this is Tom Brady, 4 or 5 weeks where they were just not even close. And Brady, from all accounts, when you hear about the practices and the regimen and screaming at guys about being in the right place, what is your idea? What's the expectation of like some semblance of this is all making sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have so many guys learning the playbook and learning the playing styles of Josh, where he wants guys, where he doesn't want guys. Joe Brady's new offense, like now that he's had a full offseason to kind of prepare the offense how he wants. There's a lot of moving pieces. So I think it does absolutely takes time, you know? And I think that's one of the things about training camp being away that is so important. Like in years past, it kind of like set the tone. This year, I'm like, they absolutely need this time to be with one another, to get to know one another's tendencies. And you bring up Brady, and I think that's a great example because for Josh this season, Josh Allen, I want to see him be a demanding leader.
Agreed.
Because I think he's a guy that leads by example. I think he also is the type of guy that, not that he doesn't want to ruffle feathers, but I think he's someone that absolutely like encourages players, which is very important. And also, Tom Brady was chewing out your ass if you missed on a big detail or if you didn't play to the standard that he was expecting. I want to see that from Josh. And what's great about my job is that sometimes I'm in the press box and then sometimes I'm on the field. So sometimes I'm around the bench. And I think that Josh is a phenomenal leader. I also would love to see him have that standard and be able to see him setting that standard and saying like, hey, you didn't do this. You need to do this better, stuff like that. So I think it's we talked earlier about like the maturation of Josh Allen. I want to continue to see that, especially now in the leadership way.
You know, you talked a little bit about Joe Brady, and I want to talk a little bit about Bobby Babbitt Jr. You know, we go from Leslie Frazier, who's an older coach, has that defense. He moves on. McDermott, who's been in the league a long time. Now all of a sudden you go from these two guys that have been proven 20-year type guys, and now all of a sudden you bring this young guy in, Bobby Babbitt Jr. How do you see his influence on this defense? Because I know he's enthusiastic. I know he's young. I would have to think it would help this defense quite a bit with their style of play, their attitude, and their energy on the field.
I asked Taron Johnson today what he makes of Bobby Babbage taking on this new role. His face lit up and he said, I think he's the perfect fit. I think he's the perfect fit. And that's obviously someone that has worked with Babbage for many years. I mean, he was a defensive backs coach, the linebackers coach. I think of even just like Terrell Bernard's play. Like last season, we're like, we'll see what happens. Is it going to be Tyrell Dodson? Is it going to be Terrell Bernard? And then I'm not saying I expect every player to have the Terrell Bernard season that we saw. I just think you're right. I think he injects so much energy and a new set of eyes. And Leslie Frazier did a phenomenal job. I think Sean McDermott went above my expectations last year calling the defense, considering everything that was on his plate. But I think you have someone like Babbage that knows his guys and the personnel so well, also coupled with his ability to teach, and then kind of the gravity and the gravitas that Sean McDermott has in terms of calling a defense. I think it really bodes well for this team because you have the continuity of McDermott and kind of the safety blanket that he offers. And then you can also have some of the ideas and the freshness that Bobby Babbage brings. So I feel like for this team, I'm genuinely curious to see how that everything comes together. Now, McDermott hasn't said whether or not Babbage will be calling the plays. So we don't know that yet, but I do think that I would imagine Babbage is going to be calling the plays because
I think McDermott loves it. I think he loves being that engaged. Even listening to his presser today when he was talking about knocking the rust off and really getting the feel for what's happening. Like, I think he likes being engaged.
I mean, I 1000% agree. And again, last year went way better than I was expecting.
Same.
Truly. But I just think for Babbage to stay in Buffalo and take that job, I would be like, why? Like, because other teams were interested in him.
Yeah,
I might be like, why wouldn't I go to a different team and be defensive coordinator and be able to call the plays than here? Now, he's been in Buffalo a long time. Obviously, his father coached in Buffalo, so maybe there's that connection, that personal point that makes him want to stay. But I would imagine that Babbage would be calling the plays.
Talking with Jenna Cottrell from 13WHAM Rochester and Buffalo Plus. Got you for a couple more minutes, so we're gonna a couple more questions to kind of see where this thing goes. Super.
Was I doing this right? By the way, Caitlin Clark taught me how to do this. I was making sure my logo was right.
Nailed it.
I nailed it. Good. Okay.
Everybody listening in podcast form is right on the same page with it. They're like, "Yep, you got it."
Remember we talked about it off air about Joe and his Hank. There you go. We're going to get a lecture about. You can't do things that they can't see on podcasts.
I have never lectured you once.
Please, Joe, continue. It's like I'm back in J school.
Oh my gosh. So Jerry is the resident Stefan Diggs of the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network, in case you were wondering.
I show up to work though.
Brandon Bead. So I just want to go down the Micah Hyde road for a couple quick questions. So Brandon Bean said, and I love the way this is building right through just the last couple weeks, that Micah, who is currently not on the roster. So Brandon Bean said that a couple weeks ago. Then Micah said, and then Micah said, I'm not technically on the team right now before the softball tournament. And McDermott today says when he is done playing, and I use that word flexibly, it's like, wait a second. I just want to know, and I know you addressed it a little bit, what are you hearing? What are you feeling about the likelihood of Micah returning? We know he's in shape. He ran a 10K, all that kind of stuff. And when? Is it after training camp, a la Bruce Smith? Is it in the midseason? Is it right before the playoffs? What are you feeling?
So I think for Micah Hyde, he's 33 years old, coming off some of those neck injuries, which is scary. He's got 2 young kids. Him and his family mean a lot. His wife, his kids mean a lot to him. I think for him, he said this on Sunday, it's either Buffalo or bust. Like if he is going to come back and play, it would be for the Bills.
Yeah.
And I think for him, once you hang up those cleats, it's hard to come back. So I get why he's really taking the time to make sure the decision sits well with him. And I also think that he doesn't want to go. If I were him, I wouldn't want to go through training camp. I wouldn't want to do that.
Nope.
I mean, what's your input? Yeah.
Nope.
No, right?
I'll show up on Monday before the first game. Nope.
Yeah. I don't blame you. You don't want to. You've put in your time. Your shit. Right. Sorry, I swear a lot, but
you're fine.
You're good.
You know your stuff. So I think for him, it's just like, I don't want to go to OTAs. I don't want to go to training camp. And I respect that because been there. He's done that. He's won that, like whatever, So I could see Micah down the line. Maybe it is before the first game. Maybe it is there's an injury. You never want injuries, but maybe there is an injury and things look a little bit, thin behind. So they're like, hey, Micah, would you want to come back? I think it would be that. I would be shocked if he was like, can't wait to sign up for another training camp. But I just get for him, I think it's a decision that he absolutely is taking seriously because it is the magnitude of it. But I would not be shocked if you were to tell me like, hey, in October, the Bills signed Micah. I'd be like, oh, okay. And water is wet.
No, and I think you're 100% correct because why are you going to come back? You've got to give Bishop a chance. You got Mike Edwards, a few others, Rapp. You got guys. Why are you going to come back and put yourself through that and stand on the sideline? So I think that if he comes back, it is that situation where there's been injury and they need that vet back there that knows the system and they need a quick response, for a traumatic situation. So that to me makes sense. I've got to ask this question. We only got a few more minutes. I don't know about phase 3, what they let them do and not do. Obviously, they had helmets on today, which was amazing. I hope they did okay wearing helmets. I know that's stressful, but do we have any kind of idea? I know we talk about McGovern at center. If a second group goes out, is it Van Pan Granger or is it Edwards? Do we have any inkling of who maybe the second center is behind McGovern?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question considering too, like the movement of Mitch Morris was so unexpected. I would look, this is just my opinion. I could see it being Edwards, but obviously the draft pick that they had, like they have a lot of belief in. So I think right now it's a little bit too early, but that being said, we talked about it earlier, like the competition this year on this roster is going to be, it's just going to be different and to a level that we really haven't seen in quite some time. So I'm still like processing the fact that they moved on and, Mitch Morris is no longer on this roster. Like when we were heading into the offseason, I remember us talking to Mitch and him being like, yeah, like the NFL is a weird business. And I remember being like, all right, but we know Mitch will be back. Obviously the way the NFL works, it's pretty incredible and pretty ever changing.
We had Billy Connolly on, who was also a teammate of mine in Buffalo, who's now an agent, and he's Mitch Morris's agent.
Oh, okay.
And Billy was straight up with it. He's like, there was no shenanigans. There was no craziness. It was basically, we need money. You give us the easiest option to get that money and not have as much dead cap space. So you're above 30, so you're going. It was that simple. There was no, conspiracy theories or anything. And we'd all were shocked by it. I was shocked
no offers either. There was no like, hey, would you stay for less? Which he pretty much strongly inferred without saying it direct that Mitch would have considered staying for less money.
Yeah, but like that's what's so wild to me is like I get the NFL is absolutely a business, but like clearly I'm like, well, why didn't you re-sign Jordan Poyer again? Like all these things where it's like, wow, you definitely do have to make some tough decisions.
But I think the thing is when and it's the same thing with Micah Hyde when you're talking about Micah, when you're keeping guys like that around a long time. Now, obviously, Mitch still has some good football in him. He is north of 30. If you fall in love with your own and you don't go ahead and allow your young guys or guys you brought in, because there's some people that say McGovern was brought in and was told eventually you will be the starting center, even though he played well at left guard last year. If you don't allow these other guys to develop and come along, it stagnates the growth of your football team. So I think that had a lot to do with it as well.
Yeah. Right. No, I mean, I definitely hear you. I get attached.
Yeah.
I don't like change, Jerry. I don't want change.
You don't like your cheese move, so to speak. You don't. You never read that book?
No, I get it though. It makes sense, and that's how NFL teams evolve. And because Josh Allen is the quarterback that he is, and he is expected to be in Buffalo for a very long time, the teams will change around him, and that's exactly what's happening.
Yep. One more question for you, Jenna. But before we get one more question to you and then get you on out of here, and we're going a little bit late, so I appreciate you being with us. Let everybody know where they can find you, where they can find your content, and how they can tune into Wham 13 Rochester if they don't live in Rochester.
Yeah. So if you do live in Rochester, check out Channel 13. We are the ABC affiliate. Channel 13. ABC, and then also we have the Buffalo Plus channel on YouTube. So we have a lot of fun. It's my coworkers, Mike Catalana, Dan Fates, myself. We have like post practice reports, post game reports when we're in season. We do a podcast. So if you just go on YouTube and check out Buffalo Plus, we have plenty of content up there. We actually just did a video today, Dan Fates and I did, from Buffalo, kind of recapping a little bit more of OTAs and what we saw out on the field and some of like the major notes. We talked about a decent amount of stuff that we covered in this video. But that being said, we're always posting new stuff. We have a new podcast drop every Tuesday. So
super glad that you joined us. Now we're going to finish up with Micah Hyde. One more question for you. And this is just from what you've been around and what you've kind of seen. There are levels of what I would call leaders on a football team, organizations, but specifically on a football team, whether captains, vocal leaders, productive leaders, tone setters. Jordan and Micah came in together and they were both captains on this football team. But do you get a sense, just even from McDermott's comments today, that Micah had just a different impact on this football team as a leader in the culture than maybe the other ones had?
I actually don't think so. I think it's different because Jordan is in Miami now. And this is my inference. Like, I feel like both Poyer and Hyde, when they came in, obviously Hyde was a little bit more touted because coming from Green Bay, whereas Poyer was coming off a pretty serious injury. I believe it was his neck injury, that the expectations might have been really different. But I think they both were the type of players that were vocal, but were also able to show up and make big time plays. And I think they kind of maybe led in a little bit of different styles in terms of who was more vocal and who wasn't. But I think for this team, it's Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Like, we joke, is it Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, or is it Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde? Like, they're just so synonymous with one another and the legacy that they have. I think it's just a little bit different now because Poyer is with the divisional rival, whereas Micah is, figuring out if he wants to play football or if he wants to retire. But the leadership that they represent honestly cannot be understated. I mean, they bought into the process before Josh Allen was Josh Allen, before Josh Allen was even on the Bills. Like, they really helped set the culture in Buffalo and turn it into what it is. And I think because of that, that is why Micah Hyde is so respected. That's why at Micah Hyde's softball game, Jordan Poyer got the applause that he has or he did, because they just represent so much and they bought in before anyone else was buying. So I know that both those guys have the utmost respect of everybody in that room.
Awesome. Jenna, thank you so much for joining us. I'd love to get you. We would love to keep you in the rotation every couple of months or whatever, just kind of as we do these on the beats. We do them weekly. And I'm excited for the season to come where I can get you between all you guys between McDermott's presser on Monday and then the Wednesday presser. Like, what do you want to know? What are you gonna ask? What are you gonna press into? Super. Jerry, rather, any final comments or anything?
No, I'm just very appreciative for Jenna coming by. It's a great time on the show. We appreciate you. Anything we do for you, please let us know. And I'm looking forward to having you back on this season.
Yeah, awesome. Absolutely. Thank you guys. I appreciate it. This was fun.
Time
always flies. I feel like when you're talking Bills, like the time always goes.
100%. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been tuned into the On the Beat program on the Overreaction Buffalo Sports Network. My name is Joe Miller. That's Jerry Ostrowski and Jenna Cottrell joining us. For the three of us and for John Fina, who couldn't be with us tonight, go Bills.
Go Bills.
Go Bills.